Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 92 of the Cloudcast. We are back in the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, after multiple weeks on the road. So, Aaron, how you been, man?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. Where have you been lately? Because I know I've been traveling a bunch.
So I was out at the CloudStack Collaboration Conference and recorded a couple pretty good episodes of the Cloudcast out there, and just kind of doing the summer thing, at the beach with the family, taking some time off, and that's probably about it.
Okay, cool. So you're sort of covering the dirty OpenStack hippie side of the show. You're doing OzCon next week?
2 weeks from now.
Okay.
Yes, so OzCon's coming up in 2 weeks.
So folks can expect some more open source related stuff. If they want to throw us out some topics they'd like to go track down, send them out to the cloudcast.net Twitter account. I went out to Structure in San Francisco, which is part of what we'll get into with the show today. I went out to Cisco Live in Orlando, sweated like crazy, but it was a good show as well. So I've been traveling a bunch, and then next week I'm going off to the Bahamas. So if folks don't hear from me for a week, that's where I'll be. So wanted to do a couple of quick house cleaning things. So there's been some interesting stuff going on, and then we'll jump into our guests. So episode 100 is coming up pretty soon. Do we have any idea what we're planning to do yet?
None.
Okay. People have been asking. I don't think we have any idea.
Yeah, it was the funniest thing. Like somebody hit us up on Twitter and like, "What are you guys doing for 100?" We're like, that's a good question."
Yeah, no idea.
I have a couple ideas, but I'm not going to say anything because they actually involve me doing work on my end, and I don't know if I'll actually get it done.
Yeah. You've been known to make promises.
Exactly.
Cool. So a couple things. For some odd reason, Robert Scoble is now following us, which I have no idea what that means. But welcome, Robert, if you actually listen.
We'll just claim that he listens to the show.
Yeah, exactly. We went cross podcast world. You and I were on the Geek Whisperers, which is John Troyer and Matthew Brender and Amy Lewis's thing, talking about the behind the scenes of the podcast. And I think we did so bad that they actually haven't published it. So that may never see the light of day, but we were over there. Cool show if anybody's into social media. Thanks to everybody listening to the Mobilecast with Brian Katz. The listenership has been really, really good. I think we've learned a lot from it. So we're not in the mobile world. Brian brings a really cool kind of user experience to that thing. So that was good. And then one last thing, and then we'll jump into our guest because I know he's sitting there and like he's really, really good. So I was at Cisco Live. I thought this was kind of funny. So I was at Cisco Live and I ran into two people. We ran into a bunch of people who were like, "Hey, like the show. We know who you guys are," which is very cool. It's always fun to run into people that listen to the show. But we had two that I thought were really good. I ran into one guy, and I'll withhold names, who basically came up to me and he said, "I like your show. Aaron's great, but you pretty much suck." Right to my face, which was great. And then I had another one. I had another one with a guy who I really respect, super smart technical guy, a name people would know in the cloud. And he basically said, "Yeah, I listened to your show for a good laugh." And I'm not really sure how to take that one either. So anyways, so the bottom line is we provide a little bit of comedy, and I generally suck, but you're doing well, so kudos to you. So
that's hysterical.
All right. So anyway, so today's guest is Chris Matthew, and I'm going to introduce him in a second. But it was kind of an interesting story as to how we met. So I've been following Chris for a while on Twitter, as we all seem to do. Like we know more people on Twitter. I go to lunch with. I'm out at San Francisco for Structure. I go to lunch with Christian Riley and our friend Heather Fitzsimmons, who runs Mindshare PR, and I'm getting ready to go have lunch. And we go to this awesome Italian restaurant, and there's this dude there who looks like Captain Morgan, and he's super enthusiastic, and he's talking, and we introduce each other. And so Chris, welcome to the show first and foremost, Chris Matthew.
Hey, thanks, guys. Glad to be on.
We've been yakking. We left you the wins there. But anyway, so Chris and I are sitting across the table from each other, and we'd never really met. And I'm talking to Christian a little bit, and he just jumps into it. And he's got this awesome, huge personality, and he's talking about real-time web. And Christian's like, "Man, you got to have him on. He does really cool stuff." And I was like, "Absolutely. When do you want to be on the podcast?" And he's like, "Anytime you want." So we finally got around to it 2 weeks later. Chris, cool. Thanks for being on, man.
Well, I love the Captain Morgan.
No, the reason I said that is you have this awesome sort of goatee, but it's not just a goatee. It's this really well manicured Raleigh fingers kind of curly cued thing. It's awesome. It's
I'm blushing. Don't know how to take that, Brian.
So first and foremost, give us some of your background, because you and I talked a little bit that day. We went and hung out at the Bechtel offices in San Francisco. But give us a little bit of your background, because you've got a very cool, interesting background about development, about real-time web, which is your passion, and some of the things you've been doing. Give some folks some idea of who you are and what's your background.
Oh man, so I've been doing this whole enterprise / entrepreneur type balance my whole IT career. I've been CIO of like the Arizona Lottery, a big rebate sweepstakes company, healthcare, all over the place, and I've built and sold 3 startups to date. 2 were telecom related and 2 were cloud related, and I'm a hacker. Like at the heart of what I do, I build cool shit. I'm a Node.js developer for like 3 years. I started, I think, when it was on version 0.2. So I mean, I love geeky stuff. I love hacking together ideas, in a weekend. I love participating in hackathons, and that was how I met Christian Riley. You were talking about the previous guest on your show, and we were hanging out there in San Francisco. I think I knew Christian probably a year or 2 before I joined Bechtel to work with him. So it's funny how like Twitter just brings us all together, and you're able to know people oftentimes before you even sit down and meet them. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. So that was the thing that so you sort of said you're a hacker. That was the thing that jumped out at me. We ate some lunch. We went back to your office, and you were like, "Man, let me show you the stuff I'm working on." Like it was just like immediately. It was like, I'm working on this stuff, and half the stuff was Bechtel stuff, and half the stuff was, like you said, it was stuff you were doing on the side. But like you were sort of a self-proclaimed real-time web guy, and you were kind of talking about that. Tell the folks kind of what that means today. What is the real-time web? What's cool about it? What's kind of behind the scenes, the background and the technology, and what's changing about that space and that terminology that you're using?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of coming down from a high all day today. One of my real-time web startups, Telephone, it's the side project I'm working on now. It was on Hacker News like all day long today, the front page. It was in the top 10 on the front page for like all morning long. And kind of watching it, at one point it had over 100 simultaneous users, making phone calls and doing all this live stuff all at the same time. Really kind of brings all this stuff into focus or context where the web is going today. So back kind of in the .com boom, boom and bust that we experienced back around 2000. Everything was kind of shifting into Web 2.0. Remember all that, and the social web, and that's kind of when Facebook and Twitter kind of started cutting their teeth, and et cetera. Then there was all this buzz about the semantic web. How are we going to organize all of this data? And then kind of artificial intelligence and all these big ideas around better categorizing and organizing the web. Today, we've kind of like leapfrogged all of that, and there's really 2 main focuses that I see kind of trending right now around modern web development. One is mobile first. Yep. I think people are realizing that mobile is just prevalent everywhere. It's the go-to device, and rather than the old school way of building a browser-based app, or God forbid, a thick client app, and then trying to say, okay, how do we like kind of make that shrink to fit a tablet? Okay, then how do we shrink to make that fit a phone? It's the other way around. We need to be looking at this now. Let's build some really fast, lean applications that run great on a phone, and then once you nail that, then you move up to a tablet, then you move up to a browser. So that's the one trend I'm seeing. The second trend is around real-time web. It's people don't have the patience anymore. They don't want to refresh a web page anymore. You just even look at Twitter and Facebook, how they work. As new stories or tweets come in, your page, just automatically gets updated, or it notifies you've got 100 new tweets to read or whatever. That's the concept I'm talking about with real-time web, where the server is pushing live data to your site as you need it or as things change, making this really interactive, and this trend of pages becoming like a whole web app or mobile app becoming like a single local running app where it's just one page and everything just happens in the background using like just quick little WebSocket or JSON calls that just manipulate data, or the server pushing you data to get real-time updates. I mean, it's a cool time to be, in this tech space.
Okay. And I think you talked about kind of bringing these two things together. You've got a little bit is sort of social and cultural, right? People want stuff faster. They're constantly looking for that update from a news story or their friends or their status. And then you've got devices that, while they've got a bunch of CPU, like mobile devices, can't be churning them all the time because of battery. You've got sort of limited bandwidth on wireless networks, much less so than you have, your 1 gig, 10 gig stuff in the office or something. And all that stuff's sort of coming together at the same time. Is that fair? I mean, is that kind of the intersections we're talking about here?
Absolutely. To make these applications really responsive, you really don't want to be, swapping pages out every time the user clicks a button. You really want to be just one page, a single page application, just moving tiny bits of JSON back and forth between the server. And I know we're going to talk about Node.js, but really that's kind of its sweet spot. It's like HTTP is a first-class citizen. These WebSockets are so easy. Everyone's building, chat applications or dashboard applications or all these live applications off of using Node.js. I mean, really the tools are changing to get us there. And like push notifications or Android notifications, they wake your phone up, only when it's needed or only when there's information that needs to be pushed. So you're constantly trying to minimize that latency and that bandwidth consumption around the everyday life of the application.
Okay, very cool. So, we've got a lot of folks that listen to the show that, I think they come to the show and listen because they're cloud infrastructure guys, they're architecture guys, not as much development folks, but they're very, very interested in, especially around the new applications and what the data flows look like, what the architectures look like on the back end of these things. So whether it's a typical Node.js type of application, you were showing me some stuff on various sort of database as a service types of things that you were kind of playing with. What's if the front end, the client side, has to be doing as little work as possible, what's the back end though look like? I mean, how much interaction is going on between what's the typical database that you're going to be using for this? Is it NoSQL? Is it SQL? Is it there is no database? What do the traffic patterns look like? Give us a sense of what the back end of all these things look like.
Yeah, so the back end honestly isn't doing much more work than the front end. It's like only when there's particular information that needs to be updated, then it kind of wakes up and does things. So kind of the stack everyone seems to be gravitating to is Node.js. They're using typically WebSockets to do these real-time persistent connections between the client and the server. So, whether the server has to broadcast a message, JSON message to every client attached or to a room or like a group of clients or a specific client, it's really simple, lightweight to do, and just say, hey, here's some data, JavaScript running on the server, JavaScript running on the client. They just know what to do, and it's easy to call one out and say, hey, here's some information for you to update your page. Typically, these applications, kind of everyone's gravitating to NoSQL, mostly Mongo. I know Couch has got a huge following for NoSQL. I know Reox, kind of that one that has like, the mission critical, live through anything type of an instance. And typically when people are like scaling these things out horizontally, since WebSockets kind of connect to a single server, they keep a persistent connection live between a server and a client. A lot of folks are using Redis as kind of that key value store to scale horizontally WebSockets across many servers. So that's kind of a stack, and there's some companies coming into this space that are trying to mask, make the whole infrastructure look a lot easier, where you don't have to deal with, I guess, like WebSockets as a service, I would call it. But
now, is that what people call like backend as a service, or is that something different? I hear that term sometimes.
Yeah, there's a friend of ours at Bechtel, Justin Burley's got WTF as a service.com. It's like, you can put anything in front, mobile backend, WebSocket as a service. I think I just made that one up. I don't know. But some companies like Pusher is one of them. They were acquired by Heroku in the early days, and then Realtime.co. I think they got like $100 million in funding like a year ago. But they're trying to make it so simple that any programming language, you don't worry about the stack or the scaling. You have an API to call to send a message, and it pushes it to all the clients. So that's kind of an interesting space.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Chris, let me ask you this then. So, I'm just thinking about this as you're explaining all this. So, we almost have like a third model that in my head of, like you were mentioning earlier, God forbid, a thick client, right? And then the exact opposite of a thin client, right? Basically, where is that processing happening? Is it happening on the client side? Is it happening on server side? But you're actually proposing where, you've got almost a medium amount of processing happening on both ends, and it's all on demand and push related based off the server side. So you can't really call it thick, you can't really call it thin, and it's this whole real time stuff. I'm just thinking that I was like, oh, okay, this is almost like a nice balanced model in the middle.
Well, and a lot of people were starting to call it client server, but it's not that either. It's almost like peer networks. I mean, you can almost look at the client as a peer to the server, because they're both doing processing. And that's another strength of Node.js. Besides being real lean and fast, it uses events instead of threads to scale. So like the traditional way of like building a Ruby on Rails application or .NET or Java or something like that is that when you have a web request come in, it basically stops all the processing on that thread to do what you tell it to do. Like, go look up this data in the database, go call this API, and every time you're making a call, it's blocking is what it's referred to. It sits and waits until that data comes back. Node.js being event model driven, it just keeps processing, and it uses like JavaScript callbacks, so that when the data comes back, then it wakes up and says, okay, now my callback's firing. Now what do I do with this data? Well, kind of think about that in this peer-to-peer kind of real-time world. So when an event happens that the server knows about, it wakes up and then can push the message to the client, or vice versa. Client could say, hey, I want to put a bid on eBay, for instance, and then it wakes up and tells the server, hey, increment that by $5. And then the server says, hey, everyone else that's watching this item, you all need to update your browsers, by $5.
Interesting.
Wow. Very cool.
Interesting. So I want to try and connect a couple dots here and help us. So prior to going over and working with the guys at Bechtel, you ran a company, or you were part of a company called Nodester, which Node.js focused paths, I guess, is maybe the simplest way to focus. You were very, very early in kind of delivering platform as a service specific for Node.js. People, when they tend to sort of dichotomy cloud, they talk about infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. And like you just said, there's a bunch of people that are kind of trying to provide these various middle layers, right? Whether it's database as a service or whatever the WTF as a service. Like what's really going on here? Because I mean, we've talked to guys like Cloud Foundry who provide a whole bunch of capabilities. They kind of abstract the infrastructure. They're providing various queuing and message buses, and then kind of framework libraries. Is that like a big monolithic stack compared to what you're seeing in the real-time world, or what? Like, help us kind of decode what really is going on, or for certain applications versus, say, real-time applications.
Yeah, so Nodester came out before Cloud Foundry. I was really excited to beat them to the punch, and it really started off as a kind of an FU project. Like I said, I'm a hacker. I was waiting around for like 3 months for this for these Node.js hosting coupon codes. Everyone was calling them back then, like to let you in as an alpha Node guy to host your Node app on the cloud. And Heroku was a company I was waiting for. Joyent had no.de. I was waiting for a coupon code, and nothing. Like 3 months go by, still nothing. I take 2 weeks off for Christmas break, and that becomes my little hacker project. I'm like, what? How hard is this to build this cloud thing? What's involved in building a cloud? And you write a couple of lines of code. Next thing you know, you've got hundreds of lines sitting there, and it's actually starting to kind of work. And I put a link out on Hacker News at the end of the 2 weeks. I open sourced it, right? So I was like, "F you." here's a PAS, a Node.js PAS, and it's open sourced, and it blew up. It was all over Hacker News. Mashable picked it up. New York Observer picked it up. I think we had 10,000 email addresses in line now waiting for Nodester coupon codes.
Wow!
After that first weekend, so and I had so many holes and gaps in like what it really takes to build a cloud platform. Okay, so from the Hacker News stories, Dave Glass, the YUI lead developer at Yahoo, jumped in and said, "Dude, I can help you secure that platform." I'm like a Linux noob. I know enough to be really dangerous. And he came around and built Chroot sandboxes and pushed all that code up to GitHub. Next thing you know, we had a rivaling open source platform as a service that I think disrupted all the other guys at play. They started giving away all their Node.js coupon codes, waiving all the fees, and at the last report, there was like several Nodester servers inside of Yahoo, several inside of HP Labs, another one that I had heard about inside of like Channel 4 in the UK. I mean, just all over the place. That went kind of crazy.
Wow. So, and all this basically came together, I mean, the equivalent of like a month and a half of people, working on it, you hacking on it, other people just picking it up and running with it?
Yeah, and it was mostly me in the beginning, and then as it started like really taking off, you started getting a lot of people that
what was the software that made the Hacker News today?
Yeah, it was 12 though. Maybe we should try that.
So this is not unusual. We've had our fair share of Skype works, Skype doesn't work. So let's just keep cranking along. So yeah, like Aaron said, so we were talking earlier. You're fired up. What is 12 phone? Like, what's the we talked a little about Node. What's 12 phone and what's got you all fired up?
Yeah, so 12 phone. Again, it's taking the idea is taking Twitter to be real time, moving Twitter into the real time space. So Twitter, in my opinion, is probably the best messaging platform in the world. I mean, it's amazing how you can follow and tweet, broadcast, millions of people, direct messaging. All that's really solid until you get to the point where you're trying to have a conversation in real time on it. It kind of all falls apart. Your DMs are, 30 seconds, a minute apart. It's kind of awkward. You can't connect everything. And, if you want to try to take things like live, Twitter can't do that at all. So 12 phone, it attaches to Twitter, so it uses the 700 million, however many users Twitter has as its user directory, and replicates many of the features of Skype, all in the web browser using WebRTC and HTML5. So you get presence, so you can see when people are online or offline. You get instant messaging, or like live chat with all the multimedia capabilities that you would expect, links, photos, YouTube embeds, whatever. You also get live voice and video conversations or chat as well. So WebRTC, I don't know if your audience really has been following WebRTC, but I would say it's probably the biggest disruptor we're going to see in the space since cloud technology on the internet. WebRTC. RTC stands for Real-Time Communications. And what this does is it brings peer-to-peer communications to the web as like a first-class citizen. So you and Aaron and myself could turn up a whole conversation peer-to-peer, encrypted, with high-definition audio, high-definition video, without an ISP in the middle, without like a server, being able to wiretap this information. It's just all pure as can be, low latency communications. And part of the WebRTC spec, so you can also get access to the camera, access to the microphone, so you can start doing all sorts of other interesting, like non-real-time things. Like you want to take a picture of your avatar, for Facebook or Twitter, you could do that with WebRTC without Flash or any of those old technologies in getting in the way. But there's another huge component of WebRTC, and that's called data channels. So now, once we're pinned up together on a browser-to-browser, peer-to-peer session, in addition to doing video, chat, and stuff between us, we can start moving bits directly peer-to-peer between our machines. So we could do file transfers, we could do like real-time gaming, screen shares, what have you, and it's all directly between our browsers.
Wow.
So the idea is not to replicate Skype, on Twitter. I think we've got a BHAG, I call it, a big, hairy, audacious goal of creating a telecom company, the next generation telecom company in the web browser. So think about that for a minute. It's like Skype's kind of cool, but Skype was cool like 10 years ago. It's like if you, and the telephone's like 137 years old. If you could reinvent it today, what would it look like? I mean, it would be connected to the social networks. Your Twitter handle or your Facebook username would be your telephone number, so to speak. It would have all this live, real-time communications, collaboration tools built into it. And then you look at all of those old things that telecom has been building for years, like, how do you connect to a customer service agent, or how do you find the next available customer service agent, to buy something on the web, or how do you all these CRM systems like Salesforce, being able to integrate on top of telephone. Like telephone, in essence, is becoming that telecom as a service.
Right. So not only did you potentially fix the audio recording problem that we're having tonight, where we've had to switch off of Skype.
Lots of editing tonight.
You may have reinvented like how porn and stuff like that is done over the web, since you can integrate Twitter and there's no tracing of anything. You're now the terrorist network's best friend because it's encrypted and it doesn't go through a centralized server.
It all starts with porn. So
it's the internet. Well, it has to.
What's funny is that's exactly what my wife and I were talking the other day. I released a new feature. I thought it was really cool. I call it Experts. And you remember the old 900 numbers back in the day of telecom, where it started off legitimate, right? So it was lawyers or computer technicians or whatever. You could buy a 900 number, you get paid. The phone company would take a commission and route the call, and you'd never worry about billing. It would just show up, on your bill. So I was like, that's brilliant. With telephone and this expert service, you could create like your own geek squad if you wanted to. You could find all your buddies that know how to fix PC problems, put them all together under a telephone account, and then route calls and charge $1 a minute to be answering these calls all day. And my wife was just like, who else is going to use that service, right? Yeah, I guess so.
Hey, that's fine. I mean, you can't control how people are going to use communication, but well, that's cool. That's cool, though.
But that's the other thing. Up until WebRTC, you really couldn't do this affordably. You would have to host all of that streaming through your servers. And with peer-to-peer on WebRTC, all telephone does is it keeps track of signaling, to say, hey, who's all online? How do I connect these two people? Once it connects them, it gets out of the way. And all of that bandwidth is directly between the two peers, not the server. So that's like beauty from like keeping costs down, beauty from like if the servers go down or whatever, the calls stay up. It's also beauty because it's out of the way of no potential wiretapping capabilities. It's like Skype used to be this way, so Skype So Skype had this concept of supernodes, and you didn't know whose computer was the supernode, and all these groups and communications are going through somebody's, there's lots of these somebody's supernodes around the internet. When Microsoft acquired them, they said, we're going to pull everything back into the Microsoft network. And now every conversation we do goes through Microsoft on Skype.
And that's why Skype sucks for us now, because every time we try and make a call, it goes up to Redmond.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Exactly. So
yeah, your latency latency everything, yeah.
Yeah. So you showed me sort of a prototype of this, or at least you were showing it to me a little bit, but it's all web based. Is this getting moved down? I mean, can I use the web, the browsers that are on a mobile phone today, or is it still sort of confined to a laptop or something?
So it's getting better. So today on laptops, you can use Chrome or Firefox. As of just last week, Firefox rolled it into the off-the-shelf standard version of Firefox. So that's cool. You've got two browsers on the desktop that works on. And Opera, it's coming in Opera. IE's Microsoft's creating their own version, so who knows where that roller coaster is going to end up. And Apple's been super quiet on the whole concept. So I think they're going to be forced into it with all these cool apps coming out and not working on Safari. I think they'll have to do something. But mobile, your question on mobile. Android's Chrome, for beta version of Chrome, supports WebRTC for Android, any Android device with Chrome beta. And I think they're saying that end of summer that will be in just off-the-shelf Chrome. So they're making tons of progress on that platform. iOS, that's a weird one, because even though there's Chrome for iOS, there's some weird licensing control that Apple has on Google saying that the underlying WebKit version of Chrome has to be Safari's.
Okay.
Okay. So even Chrome on iOS, they haven't been able to add in WebRTC. However, Google at Google I/O was very vocal that they're shipping SDKs for iOS, for Android, all the platforms to make it easy for you to build native mobile apps with WebRTC support.
Okay, very cool.
It's coming.
Yeah, so it's coming. So so folks that may have some creative ideas, this is definitely an area to go start looking at, and
or anybody who wants to make early money on porn.
I think there's been over 100 businesses, WebRTC-focused businesses, since January start up.
Wow.
It's a gold, land rush right now. Just everyone trying to figure out what can they do. I've seen ShareFest, I think, just came up, letting people transfer files between peers. That was cool. Another, I think, peercdn.com came up, and they were trying to show that you could make a peer-to-peer distributed CDN network, basically just by having one person download the page and then use the network effect to let everyone else load the website from everyone else. I was like, that's kind of mind-blowing. Like these ideas you can use data channels for with peer-to-peer and moving things more to that every peer on the network, even the servers, are basically peers. I think that's going back more in line with what we started talking about at the beginning of the show, was about the real-time movement. Everything's just connected now.
Yeah, and I think the thing that the more I'm listening to you, and the more I kind of contrast that to maybe let's just take Cloud Foundry as a PaaS platform, and I'm not kind of being critical. I think we're still in kind of what's been interesting to us, and we've had a bunch of folks who've come on, and this is one of the cool things about the cloud, because everything is anymore, it's sort of in public domains, for the most part, the interesting services, and they're connected via APIs, is we don't really have a definitive stack. Like a term like PaaS could mean a whole lot of things. And we're still in an early time where it's like people are figuring out, do they focus on this little segment of stuff that provides a cool set of services? How do I link and chain together a bunch of services? Like you're seeing, you can take advantage of what this massive service like Twitter does, to add value on top of it. Like, I think we're still in, even though sometimes Aaron and I will joke around this, like sometimes it feels like, the cloud's getting kind of old, but I mean, there's still a lot of really new stuff that's going on, and sometimes something like this will spark another huge kind of set of ideas for people, and that stuff's always very, very cool. And especially since the architecture is modular, you've got some stuff that's open source that people can go hack on. It's still a pretty interesting time, and there's, like you said, there's some explosive areas. You just kind of find what they are.
Yeah, I think there's probably a dozen WebRTC frameworks that are kind of all under various stages of development. There's probably a dozen really good WebSocket libraries that are out there, and you're right, everyone's kind of jockeying and trying to figure out what does all this mean, but the cloud is always going to be integral into making this happen. I mean, there's no other way to really scale on demand, and keep costs down in the process. That's integral. But what I think is interesting is this movement to more peer communication. So I think we're going to see a lot of traffic being offloaded from the cloud and more chatter between machines, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. And Christian Riley loves to talk about the Internet of Things. And he's spot on with this. There's a whole trend of like sensors and devices talking to themselves or talking to each other, machine-to-machine communications, and reacting. And when you look at like companies like, have you guys have heard of If This Then That?
Yep.
Or Zapier is another one of these services. They basically watch for events, and then you can program them to do other events, and you can like chain a whole series of things. So you could say, like, when my alarm clock goes off, then make the coffee. And it's like, once you start looking at how all these things could be connected and operating in real time, and you plug a service like that in the middle, now you've got this whole connected Internet of Things idea, and sensors could say, hey, it's getting dark. Now, if it's getting dark, then, turn my lights on, shut the garage, lock the house, and all of that's communicating with other devices in real time, or your voice, through Google Glass. I mean, it's interesting to see how all of these things are like kind of being even more connected and becoming even more real time through events.
So Chris, does that mean that we're that much closer to the Terminator movies and the singularity moment coming?
Yes, I think so. Unfortunately, I think so.
So what you're telling me is you're inventing the machines that are going to take over.
Yeah, I think telephone may be the next guy next.
It's the tipping point.
We jumped the shark.
That actually gives us sort of a good maybe sort of ending point, but it gives us a good sort of thing for going forward. So I'm going to throw out a couple things. So one of the things Aaron and I had kicked around for, say, an episode 100, since Christian was on episode essentially 1, or he was guest number 1, we may have to have him back on to talk about some of this Internet of Things. I know he's been doing some stuff. You guys have been doing some stuff at Bechtel, which is, you guys are building bridges and you're building airports and you're putting sensors in the cement and you're figuring out in real time how well, the cement is curing and how much you need and how dense it is. And so I think there's some practical applications, much more so than maybe, the Cisco Internet of Everything, where, you've got sensors on trees and they talk about trees talking to other stuff and stuff that kind of people can't wrap their head around. But that might have to be one of our shows coming up. Maybe that is our episode 100 possibility. The other thing I'm going to throw out, and you and I talked about this a little bit, and I'll be very interested once we get this show pieced together and people listen to it. We've talked on this show about, cloud is sort of a lot of foundational things. We spun out the mobile cast because, as you talked about, mobile first is becoming a big deal. Real time might be something that people, I know you're passionate about, people who are our listeners who are looking to, kind of move from infrastructure and do other things might want to go into. So my thing to our listeners is, if you're interested in real time, if this sort of stuff got you fired up or gets you as fired up as Chris was, we've sort of thrown a proposal out to Chris. We may ask him to do some shows like we're having Brian Katz do the mobile cast stuff, but let us know. Let us know if that's stuff you want to hear on a regular basis, periodically. It's too much for you. You want to hear more about it. And we're happy to do those sort of things. We're always looking for sort of offshoots of the show for things that people are interested in. Usually we can do audio fairly well. Tonight we're struggling, but we'll get it put together. But if folks like this, Chris has a huge wealth of knowledge. He obviously knows people in the industry. So if this is a topic that people like, just like they told us they wanted to hear more about mobile, and we've heard some things about things like big data, let us know. We're happy to, kind of get the right folks together and let them share with you guys what they're passionate about and the things they're working on. So give us feedback if you like what we talked about today, or you're interested more in it. So I think we're getting sort of long in the tooth here. Why don't we wrap it up? Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. Aaron, you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Chris, where can everyone find out more about you, what you got going on, Twellophone, everything else?
Twellophone.com is probably the best place to go for that. There's a huge blog, tons of screencasts. I love doing screencasts and showing off all the new features.
And if you go to the Twellophone blog, you can see pictures of that, the Captain Morgan mustache that Brian was referring to earlier. I was checking out the blog while we were...
blog.twellophone.com, definitely, yeah. It's got a good curl on the end of the mustache.
Cool. And where can everyone find you on Twitter, Chris?
Chris Matthew, at Chris Matthew. Matthew spelled really weird. It's Matthieu.
Very cool. All right. So if you like the show, please tell a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. 5-star only, please. Remember. You can also follow us on Twitter at @thecloudcastnet or on the web at thecloudcast.net, where you can find links to everything Cloudcast. Thanks for listening.